All right. For those of you watching on YouTube, of course, welcome to the Up the Coast podcast. For those of you listening on a podcast platform, you're already partially into this episode. So, welcome back after the 2 seconds of silence I cut in between. I'm joined once again by Jason of Big Underdog Bracketology. We're going to do an update on our segment from about a month ago. Jason, thank you for joining me at what has somehow become a more interesting spot for
Right.
the ACC.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, there'll be a lot of action over the next couple days.
So I'm looking at your bubble here. Um, I saw one bracketologist who at one point had two ACC teams as his last two teams in, and two ACC teams as his first two teams out.
Yeah.
You are a little bit more spread out, although you're close. Indiana slides into that cluster. Cal is a little bit lower.
Yeah.
And just real quick here, because you have NC State as your best 11 seed, is there any shot that they are going to slip out here? Because that's lower than what I've seen kind of across the board, but not a lot lower.
So NC State, it's a great question, Tyler. NC State is literally the team from that point back could slip out. Like they're right on the cut line. I think NC State is going to make the NCAA tournament. I think they will make the tournament. I really do. And the reason is going to be if Stanford wins and they take a tough loss to Stanford neutral court, I don't think that's a backbreaker. Pitt's probably not going to beat Stanford, and so I don't think there's a chance to absorb a really bad loss for NC State. They have enough kind of depth of wins to make it right now, and it matters. I've got them ahead of Texas. So Texas have to kind of hop them as well. I think NC State will make the tournament. There's a chance if there's a lot of bid thieves that they end up in Dayton, but I think the Wolfpack get in.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, we're basically looking at three bid thieves max, unless there's some sort of
Yep.
like Florida State miracle or some ridiculousness from an under 500 Big East team. But even then, like an A10 bid thief might clean knock VCU off the bubble. So that's another team that
That's
could have potentially gotten ahead of NC State. I'm just, correct me if I'm wrong here, just kind of glancing around, it does seem like there's more or less five spots left.
yeah.
It seems to be the kind of the general consensus here for bid thieves. A lot of those last five in, you have Texas, Santa Clara, VCU. Those three teams seem to occupy a lot of those
Yeah.
spots. And then you get to that mess of like the ACC teams, Indiana, Auburn, the remaining Mountain West teams, and I guess maybe Oklahoma, who is
Yep.
all of a sudden showing up on people's boards.
Yeah, they got over 2 games over 500, even 3 games over 500 with quality wins. Yeah, pushes them at least in the conversation. That Tyler, I think your math is spot on. There's the back five lines against NC State's probably, and like we said, they're the 6 team kind of in the tournament. So it's the back five that are up for the grabs. Keep an eye on Texas. One of the teams you're seeing on a lot of bubbles from people who just want to kind of put this to bed. You're seeing like Missouri way far back. Missouri's making that NCAA tournament, so people can stop kind of worrying if they're going to make it or not. St. Louis has really hit the skids in the Atlantic 10, but they're still making the tournament as well. It's 5 teams, like you said: Texas, SMU, Santa Clara. Right now I have VCU and in Indiana in, but there's a whole host of ACC schools nipping at the heels.
So I guess we'll start because SMU is in just an utter tailspin here. They've
Yeah,
lost four straight. I think even if we take the BJ Edwards injury out of the equation, if we just truly look at the resume here, they're getting real close to the cut line anyway. Now, when you factor in how is the committee with the precedent set last year with knocking West Virginia out because of all those good wins they got when Tucker DeVries was healthy,
yeah.
if I mean their own four without BJ Edwards, it seems to me that if they lose to Syracuse on Tuesday, to take that bad loss and fall to 0 and 5, that they're just about finished.
I agree. I think SMU has to win their first game in the ACC tournament to be considered for an at-large bid. I completely agree. The good news that SMU has going for them is considering going against all of the other ACC schools on the bubble, so Stanford, Virginia Tech, and Cal, we'll get to those in a minute. They have the best non-conference strength of schedule. Doesn't seem like much. It's 188. It's not glorious, but it's better than everybody else kind of on the bubble. So it's not too bad. Their metrics are good. So the computers say, hey, SMU has struggled lately, but they're still pretty good. They have a lot of their metrics. They sit in the mid 40s, which is right at the cut line. Traditionally, some of these other schools we'll talk about don't have that. So the computers say SMU is pretty good, obviously struggling of late. The way I look at it is this: they have to beat Syracuse, and they're not checking the boxes. When you go out west, right, late in the year, you got to win 1 out of 2. Like they had to split Stanford and Cal, and they would have made the NCAA tournament. It's that simple. They didn't. Okay, so you come home. Can you beat Miami? So if you kind of zoom out and look at other teams, you look at Ohio State, said like they were right there on the cut line, further back than SMU. They had Wisconsin at home, right? They had Purdue at home. They took advantage of those games late in the season and they solidified their spot in the NCAA tournament. SMU has not done that. All of their numbers say they're squarely on the bubble. A bad loss pushes them out. Honestly, it pushes them out pretty much for sure. They still have, Louisville, North Carolina, and the A&M win has held up all year, but they have to win. I think as of now, they're ahead of all of the other ACC bubble teams, but one loss takes it all away.
So because of how good Louisville is metric wise, and that's who they would get next.
Yeah,
So win Syracuse, lose Louisville, is that just a pure throw your hands up and we just kind of see what happens on Selection Sunday? Like
perfectly
who
said.
the
Yep,
hell really knows?
perfectly said. I've been steadfast with the NCAA tournament selection committee. Anything that happens after Friday is like half credit.
It
It's
seems like
almost.
zero, honestly.
Yeah, I was being polite. You just don't get the return on investment. But we've seen in the past Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday games matter, right? They've got to kind of get that field settled in. And while they keep saying that, of course, they factor in all of these games, we know they don't. We know they don't. Now, also, to be fair to them, they are one of 32 data points for a team in a season, right? So it's just one of 32. Uh, I think if they beat Syracuse, they lose to Louisville, they are going to be one of the teams at the mercy of are there bid thieves, right? And so, as you talked about, there's 3 conferences. There's the MAC. Someone going to beat Ohio, probably Akron, Kent State, Toledo, something like that. The Mountain West, which honestly anybody can win the Mountain West. UNLV's playing home games. Boise State has a fantastic coach. San Diego State and New Mexico are really good teams as well. Um, and then the Atlantic 10, obviously that you're familiar with, and can someone like a St. Joe's, knock out Dayton's playing really, really well. Those 3 conferences could take bids away, and they'd be at the mercy of those.
Yeah, I mean, history tells us if the A10 of the Mountain West has a real chance at a bid stealer in a 1 or 2 bid season, otherwise, they're probably going to get it.
Yes.
And the A10 especially, I think they've only
Yep.
failed to do it once in like the last 12 years. It's
Yes.
utterly ridiculous.
Yes. I really think one's being stolen from the Mountain West. Utah State has not played well away from home over the last month. They've really struggled on the road. So I think there's just too many good Mountain West schools.
I mean, I've felt like Miami's going to lose to Akron or Kent for like a month now. So,
Toledo might get them in
yeah.
in the in the semis. So Bowling Green or Toledo team could absolutely beat Miami. I think Miami's getting in regardless. I really really do believe that.
They're 31-0. Like this is we
You got to
just
let them in.
stop taking the committee seriously at this point if they don't
Yeah,
get
I
in.
mean
Even if
you,
they lose
you
to
got to let them in.
UMass.
Yeah, you
Like
got to let them in. I agree.
so moving down the line, you got Virginia Tech right now as your first team out.
Yeah.
So they're coming in, they get Wake, and then this is the team that I've had my eye on really over any other bubble team because the chance to play Clemson in that
hmm
second round, a Tigers team that is just simply not playing anywhere close to their best basketball right now. Um, do they probably need to beat Clemson, right? Just to
Absolutely.
get the
Yeah.
bump over somebody else.
Yep. SMU's numbers and SMU's numbers right now and their amount of tournament wins is ahead of Virginia Tech. It's ahead of Stanford in a lot of ways. And so Virginia Tech needs multiple wins. Virginia Tech to feel safe. I mean, they probably have to beat Wake and Clemson and Carolina, right? And they still could be sweating. That's how much traffic there is. And again, the bid thieves. So I think I think they need at least 2 or 3 wins to get in. They're going to have to beat Clemson. There's not a path again. Yeah, SMU has to win at least one, maybe two. I think Virginia Tech has to win at least two, maybe three.
So Stanford, I mean, obviously
Hmm.
they're gonna have to beat Pitt because they stink, and I can't believe Syracuse let them stick around for another game this season. But then they get NC State, who they beat a mere at the time of this recording 3 days ago,
Yeah.
and then now that's crap. I don't have the metrics up. I guess NC State's not as good of a win as Clemson though. Um, and then that would be UVA. So is this same spot as Virginia? And I guess we can loop Cal into this too. They get Florida State,
Yeah.
and then they would get Duke. Is it two each for all of these teams right now?
I think so. Yes, it's two each for both because you're trying to get into the field and then get out ahead of the couple of bid thieves that are coming. So I agree. I think it's two for both. I mean, Stanford's profile is one of the most fascinating profiles in the last 5 or 10 years of bracketology. Um, a decent start. Weren't supposed to be all that good. Then they were left for dead 3 weeks ago, and now they've looked around. I mean, at the shrapnel that happened that was last weekend, they picked up a nice win at NC State. They look around, and all of a sudden, they climbed about 8 spots in the
I
bubble
thought they were dead.
matrix.
I really
I mean,
did.
they everybody lost except for VCU and Stanford. Everybody, and so they look around and said, "Whoa, we have a chance to make tournament." They have 5 tournament wins. I mean, that's four more than Santa Clara, right? That I mean, this is crazy. So they absolutely Stanford absolutely has a chance to get in. Some projections have them in now. My struggle with their metrics are their predictive metrics. So the metrics for those of you listening, the metrics that say like how do you play consistently on a nightly basis are horrific. They have metrics in the 70s. And so that's a tough go. They have dramatically increased their resume based metrics over the last 3 weeks and heck, in the 30s and 40s, which is great. But I think they've got to keep winning. And like you said, so dealing with Stanford, got to beat Pitt, and then they got to beat NC State. That they're going to need multiple wins. They did it last week, but they're going to have to do it again. All of these teams, I know it sounds like a broken record, but they just need multiple wins to make sure that they can get their feet and get their roots in the ground for the field. Otherwise, the thieves are coming, right? And they're going to be the teams at the mercy of it. A really important game that's happening, late night here on Monday night, heading into it is keep an eye on the result of the Santa Clara St. Mary's game in the West Coast Conference. Really critical game. So Santa Clara's right now would be a team that would go to Dayton for the final four teams in the at-large pool, and they play St. Mary's in a neutral court. And I think if Santa Clara wins that game, they make the tournament. I really do. And I think if they lose the game, they're going to be right in this mix with all these teams and be at the mercy of some of the ACC teams.
So the only other thing I'm watching for, because let's say somehow we end up, because we had no thieves last year. If this
Mm-hmm.
somehow breaks again, St. Louis, Utah State, Miami are all champions here.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously SMU has the chance to slide down, like you said. If they lose to Syracuse, it's you can pretty much just go ahead and not even have the watch party on Selection Sunday.
Yep.
Santa Clara. I mean, by the time this comes out, we're going to know the result of that game. But losing to St. Mary's does not hurt you in any way. It just simply prevents you from being helped. But these
Yep.
other four teams that are floating around now, you have Auburn a little bit lower than most. You have them below all these ACC teams. Them and Texas both play those bad Mississippi teams to open the SEC tournament. Indiana is going to play a to be announced one of those god awful bottom four Big Ten teams.
Yep.
And VCU is just kind of floating in a sea of Q3 games, not only in the quarterfinals, but also the semifinals. Now, I debated another bracketologist on this the other day. The A10 semifinal not being till 3:30 on Saturday, Virginia VCU taking like a high Q3 loss just seems like that's at the point the committee's just going to ignore it.
Yeah.
But is there any chance that any of those teams could really drop off where now all of a sudden like a Virginia Tech just happens to get kind of lucky because they beat Wake Forest and maybe the resume's just slightly better in the committee's eyes than it is in your eyes. Like Is there any chance these teams are going to fall, or are they just going to lose and stay the same?
I think they could fall because if you're talking about an Indiana team who's been very, very sporadic and hasn't played very well away from Assembly Hall, I understand they won an overtime game against UCLA, but other than that, they've really struggled on the road. Nick Martinelli in the Big Ten for Northwestern is a very good player, and Northwestern always plays hard. So if you see a Northwestern beat an Indiana, which absolutely could happen, then then Indiana's not making the NCAA tournament. That would drop them. The Auburn, it's a fascinating resume, right? They've got 15 losses. I'm of the belief that that's where the committee has always historically cut it off, and
Yep.
15's been a tough number. No one's ever made it with 16 losses. I think that sets a bad precedent. I do think that the NCAA selection committee has been very, very cognizant of setting bad precedents. I think 16 losses, that's too many, right? 15. They had to beat Alabama. They didn't beat Bama. Now they're up to 15 losses when they get beat, not if, but when they get beat in the SEC tournament. That's 16. I just don't think that the math's going to work. For Auburn to make the NCAA tournament, they'd have to beat Mississippi State, they'd have to beat Tennessee, they'd have to beat Vanderbilt, and make it all the way to the semis on Saturday. That's their path. They have to win 3 games to get that number up, and then even from there, it's going to be close. And that's why I just don't feel that Auburn is nearly quite as close to the bubble right now as many do.
Yeah, I'm just looking at these teams because the one thing I feel like I've learned from the committee's sporadicness, especially last year, is that you really got to keep. I'm trying to keep in mind like who can be the three or so teams that feel like they shouldn't be in, but maybe the committee just likes something about their resume
Yeah.
more than we realize. So is there of those Virginia Tech, Stanford, Cal, is the best shot at that wild card Stanford just because of those spectacular wins at the top?
Probably. Stanford is also, I give them credit. Stanford is also 8-5 in road and neutral games, which the committee has typically rewarded teams that win away from home. The team that I just don't see much of a path, and this is why they're lower than on mine than most, is Cal, because their non-conference strength of schedule is 329. And the committee has been really straightforward. If your non-conference strength of schedule starts with a 3 for 300, then you have a very hard time getting in if you're a bubble team. Also, all of Cal's metrics right now have just gone completely in the tank ever since that home loss to Pitt. They've really, really struggled and not played very good basketball. And so I don't see much of a path for Cal right now. They'd have to do a lot of winning to get there.
Yeah, I mean it's not great. And that Kansas State loss where they were down 25 back in November, and I still don't understand how they only lost by 3 in that game, but it feels like that is still kind of holding on, haunting them. And it's just this group of losses that in this ridiculous net system don't look that bad. But if
Yeah.
you're actually someone who sits down and watches basketball, losing to Kansas State, Syracuse, Pitt, and Wake Forest, just it's just not good.
Yes, I agree. Sometimes if you have enough bad losses, they can counterbalance it. TCU early in the season lost to New Orleans, and then they lost to Notre Dame. So those are bad losses for TCU. Yeah, but they counterbalanced them. Right? There's only 2 bad losses, and they counterbalanced them with wins over Iowa State and Florida. Cal doesn't balance enough of them. That's just too many bad losses, and the computer you can't trick the computers if you don't play good basketball game after game after game for a long period of time. You can't trick the computers. And so they're really struggling with a lot of their metrics. Someone's going to look at their team sheet and say, listen, we got predictive metrics that's almost 80. Some of these computers say you're the 80th best team. I mean, you got to be in the low 40s to be considered traditionally. So they have a long way to go, and they didn't do themselves any favor by scheduling so poorly in the non-conference. Now, they may have said, well, we didn't anticipate being this good. The committee, that's not a thing. The committee evaluates you for what you are, and they're close to 330th in non-conference strength of schedule. And I just don't see much of a path for Cal. I absolutely do for SMU. I think SMU has a chance to get in. Of course, I think Stanford and Virginia Tech are right in the mix as well. Cal's going to need a lot of help to get in.
I thought Cal was dead multiple times this year, and it's funny you mentioned Notre Dame because TCU actually probably gets somewhat of a pass for that game. It was the last time Marcus Burton played for
Yeah,
Notre Dame, and they were fresh 3 days earlier. They had beaten Missouri, so That was a great week for Notre Dame. They beat two teams that are going to end up in the field, and then obviously Burton goes down. We haven't seen him since. But the irony is that if they don't have the single dumbest 20-second stretch of the season in college basketball, where they give up those 7 points to Day Ames in the last 20
Hmm.
seconds, Cal loses at home to a shorthanded Notre Dame team, and this we're not even talking about them right now.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I thought it was really simple for Cal that they came off the big SMU win, and they had all the momentum, and they had Pitt at home before taking the last two on the road. You just had to beat Pitt at home. It's really that straightforward, and they couldn't do it. And teams that are going to make the NCAA tournament win those games. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, that kind of felt like the stake in the heart, and then losing to Wake Forest a whole week later doesn't help. But hey, that's the place you put yourself in if you're Cal,
That's right.
where you're gonna have to go beat Duke now. So go earn your way in against, by the way, an injured Blue Devils squad who may be vulnerable. But yeah, I think that's it here. I mean, I've had a lot of fun in this discussion. I don't think there's really any more ground that we could really cover. I don't think we need to be having any kind of weird seeding debates right now, but you covered earlier NC State could potentially still fall into the first four if a couple things go against them. And the way they've closed out the season, they may be deserving of it.
That's right. That's right. I think they've had a disappointing year, but they can at least salvage it by making the NCAA tournament. And let's keep in mind that they have one of the best players from last year's NCAA tournament on their roster. I mean, Darian Williams was one of the very best players in the NCAA tournament last year, and he was fantastic for Texas Tech. They had Toppin, a young Anderson, and the ball and the possessions down the stretch in an Elite Eight game went through Williams. So that's worth a lot down the stretch.
Yeah. Although I meant to mention this during the awards section earlier. Maybe my worst prediction of all time when I called Darion Williams one of the 10 best players in the country going into the year. He was not even under consideration for my all conference teams this year when I did
You're
that
not.
exercise. He was probably would have been like 24th if I ranked all the players.
Don't be so hard on yourself. I thought he'd have a much better year. The reality is, though, he might be one of those guys that turns it on here in March. He has the ability to. He's got the pedigree. So we'll see. I don't know if it's a system fit with Wade's system or if he just wasn't playing hard enough, to be very, very honest. So we'll see. But I think NC State still gets in. The last point I'll make is we talked about kind of the draws here. Virginia Tech can't have a better draw. This is a perfect draw for them.
Hmm.
So, Virginia Tech, and I know Mike Young was really upset, and they played really hard against against Virginia over the weekend. Of course, Virginia Tech always plays hard. But wait, again, just to kind of recap it, if you're a Hokie fan, Wake Forest, which is very reasonable, Clemson, very reasonable, and a Carolina team that they played, 2 weekends ago, they played very well up in Chapel Hill. So there's a path there, and those 3 wins would accumulate into an NCAA tournament bid. I really believe that because all those would take place on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. That's out ahead enough that I do believe they get in with 3 wins.
Yeah, you beat Carolina. The committee wakes up on Friday. That's kind
Yep.
as they're going to check the results
Yep.
of the games as they were starting to maybe fall asleep on Thursday night. And that's
Yep.
the first thing you see is
You
Virginia
got it.
Tech beating North Carolina. They're gonna they would then be staring at a signature game with Duke that night, and that just kind of matters because you're looking at the schedule and it just clicks into your brain of, oh, Virginia Tech is still playing and winning
That's right.
games.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly right. Usually the gate comes down on Friday, about Friday afternoon. That's about it. And the NCAA tournament selection committee pretty much gets everything in lockstep by about Friday afternoon. They might move things around a little bit, but there's not a lot of jockeying. We've seen that and Tyler, you've seen over the years that there's just not a lot of weight put on anything Friday, Saturday, and especially Sunday. They don't even care who wins the Big Ten or A10.
I mean, if you really want to get deep into it, there's some weird seedings with A10 champs the last couple of years where you can tell they just put a spot and then whoever won it won it.
Doesn't matter.
Um,
That's exactly right.
which
That's
is
exactly right.
great when the 6 seed keeps winning that league and getting 2 seed lines higher than they deserve. So,
That's exactly right.
but Jason, this was fantastic. Where can all the people find you if they're not following you already?
Yeah, thanks for having me. You can find me at big-underdog.com or on X at Big Underdog Blog.
Yeah, everyone go follow Jason. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much. Enjoy the game starting tomorrow.
Yeah, you too. And thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you to Abby Schnabel for joining me to go over ACC awards. I'll be back on Monday, recap everything that happened in this ACC tournament. So be sure to come back for that. Follow it on Twitter at Up the Coast Pod. I'll be giving some thoughts out on there throughout the week.